Jacek Piwowarczyk and Cynthia Lee. English in My Backpack. Volume 3. Indochina. Buddhist Fat Ho Memorial College. 2010. We dedicate this book to Mr. Yuan Phuc Lung, whose energy and enthusiasm are inspirational. Perhaps the best way to thank him is to share the wisdom of 3 of his favorite philosophers. Wisdom begins in wonder, Socrates. Good actions give strength to ourselves and inspire good actions in others, Plato. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit, Aristotle. Through his words and deeds, Mr. Yuan lives and shares these philosophies. Introduction.
The 3rd volume of the English in My Backpack series brings you to Indochina, one of the most geographically, culturally, and historically interesting parts of Asia. Traditionally, the term Indochina refers to the former French colonial empire in Southeast Asia, which today covers the areas known as Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. Over the centuries, this region has been influenced by different cultures, which together with its stunning natural environment provides an excellent educational journey for both real and armchair travelers. I have another very personal reason for choosing Indochina for Volume 3. Without a doubt, the time I spent working as a United Nations volunteer in Cambodia was the most interesting and exciting part of my life. That job gave me an incredible opportunity to live very closely to the local people and, most importantly, contribute to the mission that changed millions of lives there. It also had a great impact on me, changing the whole course of my life. Through the pages of this book, for the first time, I want to share that incredible experience. So let's begin our photographic, geographical, and linguistic journey to this fascinating and colorful part of the world. What was my personal reason for choosing Indochina for this book?
Map of Indochina. Part 1. Cambodia. Geography. Situated in the southwestern part of the Indo-Chinese peninsula, Cambodia is roughly a square-shaped country. Most of it is flat land covered with rice fields dotted with small hills and distinctive tall trees called sugar palms. These trees, which you can see in the top and bottom images, are very important for Cambodian people because they are used as construction material to build houses, shelters for animals, and boats. In addition, their leaves are used for making roofs and house walls, braiding mats, hats, and boxes, and as roots for traditional medicine. Other main geographical features of Cambodia are the large, almost centrally located Tonle Sap, Great Lake, and the Mekong River. Tonle Sap is one of the very few rivers in the world that seasonally change the direction of their flow. There are 2 main mountain ranges, the Dangrek Mountains in the north and the Cardamom Mountains in the southwest. A typical Cambodian rural scene, Kampong Trak District. Culture and people. Cambodia is mostly inhabited by the ethnic group called the Khmer that accounts for over 90% of the population, making Cambodia the most homogeneous country in Southeast Asia. They speak the Khmer language and are followers of the Khmer style of Buddhism. Religion is very important for Cambodian people, and colorful Buddhist temples can be found almost everywhere. Buddhist monks traditionally participate in all formal village festivals, ceremonies, marriages, and funerals. Every morning, Cambodian monks take to the streets to receive rice and food donations. They are not allowed to request food. All cooked food alms are given voluntarily. Gregorz, one of my Polish friends who worked in Cambodia with me, met Sita, a local woman. They fell in love, got married, and now live in Poland with their lovely children. Motherhood. All love begins and ends there. Robert Browning. Phnom Penh. With a population of over 2 million, Phnom Penh is the largest city in Cambodia, the county's capital, and its economic, political, and commercial hub. It is located at the intersection of three great rivers, the Mekong, Tonle Sap, and Basak. It is a unique mixture of Indo-Chinese charm, Asian charm, and cordial Cambodian hospitality. Its wide riverside boulevards, fancy French colonial villas, and glittering royal palaces with soaring towers and graceful roofs noticeably contrast with narrow, dilapidated alleys, busy markets, and suburban squatters. The streets of Phnom Penh are full of pedestrians, motorcycles, and overloaded rickshaws that carry people and almost anything that needs to be transported from one place to another. The Royal Palace in Phnom Penh. A smile is the universal welcome. Max Eastman. Temples of Angkor. The northern gate to Angkor Thom. The temples of Angkor are without doubt one of the most magnificent wonders of the world. They are situated among lush jungle and farmland, just north of Tonle Sap Lake. Like a magnet, the temples attract millions of visitors annually, who flock there to experience the mysterious world of the glorious ancient past. Angkor was the capital of the Great Khmer Empire, which flourished in Southeast Asia between the 9th and the 15th centuries. Its rulers, who considered themselves as god kings, erected the striking array of over 70 dramatic stone temples, tombs, gates, and walls that have survived through the centuries. The temples incorporate elements of Buddhism and Hinduism. After the fall of the Khmer Empire, they were gradually abandoned and eventually forgotten. Overgrown by thick tropical jungle, for 4 centuries, the jewels of Angkor were only visited by monkeys, snakes, and other animals. The ruins were again rediscovered to the world by the 19th century European explorers, who were stunned by their extraordinary grandeur and elegance. Angkor Wat. Angkor Wat is the single largest religious monument in the world. It literally means city temple. The complex was built for King Suryavarman II in the early 12th century. Shaped like a lotus bud, the 5 soaring towers of Angkor Wat stand majestically in the middle of the temple. The whole temple represents Mount Meru, the mythical Hindu center of the universe. The outer walls and the moat that surround Angkor Wat represent the edge of the world and the cosmic ocean. The best time to visit this astonishing place is late in the afternoon, when the warm rays of the setting sun create a wonderful glow. Look at the photograph below. The towers of Angkor fabulously reflect in the still water of the pond.
I first went to Angkor during the UNTAC Mission in 1992. It was rarely visited by tourists at that time. The jungle that surrounds the temples was full of extremely dangerous landmines, and I was warned to stick to the major paths. A Polish soldier drove me to the ruins, gave me a radio, and asked me to call him in case of an emergency. With my heart in my mouth, I walked around the tranquil temples, taking pictures. As I walked, the peaceful sounds of nature were interrupted by the sporadic sounds of gunfire in the distance. When I went back to Angkor again 8 years later, the place was unrecognizable. Thousands of thrilled tourists simply flooded the area, shouting with excitement. Not discouraged by the crowds or the noise, I managed to find my own pace and to discover and photograph some of the most unbelievable treasures I've ever seen in my life.
Angkor is perhaps the greatest of man's essays in rectangular architecture that has yet been brought to life. Mrs. Arnold Joseph Toynbee. Bayon.
For me, the Bayon Temple, dating from the 12th century, is one of the most spectacular of all Angkor monuments. The complex is located just to the north of the famous Angkor Wat. Standing in the exact center of the walled city, the temple represents the intersection of heaven and earth. It is known for its huge stone towers that feature the four giant, mysteriously smiling faces of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara. They are believed to be portraits of King Jayavarman himself, the builder of the temple. Some people call them the Mona Lisa of Southeast Asia. The best time to visit the Bayon is late in the evening, when the warm pastel colors of the setting sun create an incredible magical atmosphere. I was very excited as I climbed the steep stone stairs, while looking for a perfect shot.
Ta Prohm. Ta Prohm is probably the most mysterious and evocative temple at Angkor. What is so special about it? Ta Prohm is simply unforgettable due to the massive banyan trees and their roots that embrace the decaying body of the temple like giant claws. The complex was deliberately left by archaeologists in such a primeval condition in order to preserve the atmosphere that the original explorers must have experienced when they found it.
My diary, 1 year with UNTAC. In the winter of 1991, I was a young geography graduate and an aspiring scientist working at the Polish Academy of Science. Confined to a small and dark room in a Warsaw University building attic, while ploddingly inputting data into a computer database, I was dreaming about exotic journeys and an adventurous life. Then one day, I learned from a local newspaper that the United Nations organization was looking for volunteers to help organize elections in Cambodia. At that moment, I realized that it was a chance to change my life forever and make my dreams come true. Without a moment of hesitation, I decided to apply. A few weeks later, after a complicated recruitment process, I finally received a letter confirming that my application had been successful. I quit my academic career, packed my bags, and finally, on the May 18th, 1991, I was on a plane to Bangkok to begin what was to be the most exciting year of my life. UNTAC. The 1970s and 80s marked the most tragic period of Cambodia's history. During the reign of the communist Khmer Rouge between 1975 and 1978, over 1.5 million Cambodian people starved to death, died due to hard labor, or were executed. Thankfully, the Khmer Rouge were driven away by the Vietnamese army, which remained in the country for the next 13 years. In October 1991, the Paris Peace Accord was signed and an interim government, the United Nations Transitional Authority in Cambodia, UNTAC, was set up in February 1992. Its jobs were to restore peace in the country that had been ruined by decades of civil war and hold free and fair elections. I was very proud to be part of the huge international peacekeeping operation that involved over 20,000 people, military, police, and civilians. I was one of 420 United Nations volunteers from 32 countries. Bantay Mae, electoral team in front of the polling station. Back to school. Upon arrival to Phnom Penh, I was placed in a dormitory of an old, stylish hotel with dozens of people of different nationalities. For most of us, that was our first time in Cambodia. Our first task was to get used to the very hot and humid weather and go through all necessary formalities. Over the next 2 months, we were given different kinds of professional training and medical advice, got vaccinated against all possible tropical diseases, and sent to school to learn some basics of the local Khmer language. In the meantime, we moved to a small guest house, studied hard, and got ready to be deployed to the countryside. The first group of UNVs in front of Raynax Hotel in Phnom Penh. Kampot. In the middle of July, I was finally transferred to Kampot, a sleepy and quiet provincial capital, located 150 kilometers south of Phnom Penh. It is beautifully located on the east bank of Kampot River at the foot of the Elephant Mountains. See map on page 5. The white hotel building in the top picture was my home for 4 months. Gary, my American partner, and I began working as district electoral supervisors in charge of Kampong Trek district, located southeast of Kampot near the Vietnamese border. Our ultimate goal was to organize elections at the district level scheduled for the following May. We soon realized how challenging the task would be. We were the first foreigners in the field, didn't have updated maps, and there was very little knowledge about the area. There were more obstacles. Almost 1/3 of the district was off limits because it was still under Khmer Rouge control. There were thousands of landmines buried underground, and many local people did not trust strangers. Additionally, we were in the middle of the rainy season, and torrential rains and flooding made our job even more difficult. Despite these obstacles, we bravely traveled around our area, meeting local people and preparing for more challenges ahead. Kampong Truck. By the beginning of November, we were quite familiar with our area. We also opened a small electoral office right in the center of Kampong Truck village, the district capital. It might sound big, but in fact it was a small village with a big temple and a local market. In the meantime, we were trying to find a place to live there, as traveling from Kampot every day was not convenient. Unfortunately, we could not find any suitable local house, so we decided to move into a small prefabricated village that the UN had built there. Each house had one room with a small bed, 2 chairs, a small table, and a fan. There were also shared toilets, bathrooms, and kitchens in the complex. Kampong Trek is beautifully located, surrounded by swamps and rice paddies. Civic education. When we arrived at the district in June, many villagers were skeptical, especially about foreigners. One of the greatest challenges was to build trust and encourage them to take part in the process. The best way to achieve that was through civic education. We tried to reach even the most remote villages, where we chatted with the people and organized mass meetings. We talked about peace, democracy, and freedom, trying to explain why it was so important to participate in the elections. Slowly, our faces became more familiar and our message more believable. Hundreds of people began coming to our meetings to listen and talk to us. It was a wonderful experience. Voter registration. Since very few Cambodians had identity cards and there was no official population census in Cambodia, all eligible people had to be registered as voters. Our job was to identify suitable locations as registration offices, recruit and train local staff, and supervise the whole process. It was so encouraging to see the results of our hard work. Hundreds of people patiently waiting for hours in long lines to get their photo and fingerprints taken in order to receive a voter's registration card. By the end of January, over 96% of potential voters had registered. Elections. In the beginning of March, I was transferred to the neighboring Bantay Maize district and continued my work there, teamed up with my new partner, Richard Campion, a young man from New Zealand. Me in front of Bantay Maize District Electoral Office with international observers from New Zealand and Australia. A year of living dangerously. During the UNTAC Mission, Cambodia was a dangerous country. There were millions of landmines and unexploded ammunition everywhere, which resulted in tens of thousands of local people losing their limbs or even lives. Images of such casualties haunted me all the time, reminding me to be extra cautious while walking or driving around. Although the UN personnel were not an immediate target of the Khmer Rouge, sadly the most tragic news arrived one day. One of us, a young Japanese United Nations volunteer, Atsuhito Nakata, had been shot dead while performing his duties. We were horrified and shocked, but decided to continue our work. The armed French soldiers and the Indonesian civilian police guarding a registration station in Kampong Trek district. There were some dangerous moments while working in Kampot province. In fact, due to the seriousness of the situation, after half a year, the French battalion responsible for our protection was replaced with the French Foreign Legion, which was more prepared for potential troubles. Luckily, during my whole time there, I did not feel any direct threat. However, sad today, I did see the dead bodies of soldiers and civilians who had been shot. And on one occasion, I was scared when a rumor spread that our village was going to be attacked. I am indeed thankful that nothing too horrifying happened to me. One of the most exciting moments was the first trip to the Khmer Rouge-controlled area when the electoral team was escorted by the French soldiers. The military task was to convince the Khmer Rouge, who had boycotted the elections, to take part in the process. Our job was to conduct civic education among the people who lived in the area. The pictures on this page were taken during that trip. The people in green uniforms and the Mao hats were the Khmer Rouge soldiers and police. The man in the middle holding the poster was their infamous bloody commander. Look closely at his eyes. Even now, after all these years, I feel fear and discomfort. Stefan's story.
It was a long time ago, but I still remember that night. It was in Tukmeas, a short time after the elections had been held. That night our electric generator was not functioning. Here was no light and the fans were not working, so we decided to sleep on the roof. At some point, when one of my colleagues was standing at the edge of the roof, suddenly a building about 50 meters away exploded. A couple of seconds later, shots were fired and several grenades exploded around the village. As I was sleeping, I first thought that the noise was part of my bad dream, so I didn't react for a minute or so. Then I realized that we were under a Khmer Rouge attack. A few minutes later, some government soldiers came out from their barracks and started firing back. Our house was in the middle of this crossfire and bullets flew around in the air like angry bees. We couldn't do anything as we were unarmed, unable to fight back. In a situation like that, it's difficult to estimate the time, but I believe that 3 of us were laying flat on the roof for about 30 to 40 minutes, all the time under heavy gunfire. As the attackers, the Khmer Rouge, were getting closer to our house, we decided to try to leave it. Firstly, we had to climb down a 5-meter ladder. 2 of my friends somehow managed to get down from the roof and through the door, but they were fired at. As I was sure that the Khmer Rouge would try to get the next guy to climb the ladder, I decided to wait. I lay down on the roof alone for, I think, another 45 to 50 minutes. Then I rushed to the ladder and down the rungs. Several shots were fired at me, but luckily all hit the wall. After another 20 minutes, someone knocked hard at the door. At that moment, we really thought that was the end. Then someone began to scream, "We are the Foreign Legion. You have to run to our barracks. We can't protect you here." So, still under fire, we ran about 200 to 300 meters and safely arrived at the French quarters. The next day, I discovered a small hole in my T-shirt. I showed it to the Foreign Legion commander and was told that a bullet from an AK-47 had made that hole. Stefan Bjorkdal.
On and off road. I believe the year I spent with UNTAC in Cambodia was probably the most interesting and exciting time of my life. Apart from an amazing and satisfying professional experience, I also had a lot of fun. Most of it was related to driving 4-wheel drive cars across incredibly difficult and inaccessible terrain. Most of the roads were in terrible condition or non-existent, and it sometimes took me more than a couple of hours to drive as little as 10 kilometers. The monsoon season brought rain, mud, and flooding, and it was not unusual to get stuck somewhere in the middle of the rice paddies. When that happened, our only hope was to be rescued by local people or another vehicle.
Part 2. Laos. Geography. Laos is a landlocked nation located in the center of the Southeast Asian peninsula. It is surrounded by Burma, Cambodia, China, Thailand, and Vietnam. See map on page 5. The country's two main geographical features are its many mountains and rivers. Heavily forested mountains occupy most of the country. The main river, the Mekong River, creates most of the western border of Laos. It is an important route for transportation and a primary source of fish. The river's fertile plains, terraces, and its southern tributaries provide suitable conditions for agriculture. The Mekong River, near Pak On Caves. Vientiane. With a population of over 500,000, Vientiane is the largest city in Laos and the country's capital. However, when compared to other chaotic, bustling Asian capitals, it feels like a small town. Beautifully located on the banks of the mighty Mekong River, Vientiane, like many Southeast Asian cities, is a city of contrasts. It is famous for its elegant French-styled colonial buildings and the wide central boulevard with its monumental Victory Gate, sometimes called the Champs-Élysées of the East, after the famous avenue in Paris, that exquisitely blend with splendid modern and historical Buddhist temples. The peaceful Mekong riverside in Vientiane. Ta Luang is an impressive gilded three-layer Buddhist stupa located at the outskirts of Vientiane. It is also the national symbol and the most important religious monument of the country. It was first built in the 16th century. After being destroyed by the Thai invaders in the 19th century, it was later restored to its original design.
There were many things that I loved about Vientiane. Its relaxed atmosphere, slow pace of life, great food, and most importantly, its fabulous location along the picturesque Mekong River. I spent a good deal of time slowly strolling along the peaceful riverbank, looking for attractive photographic settings. I saw birds gently gliding over the river, children happily playing in the water, fishermen gently paddling their canoes looking for a good catch, and large boats and barges slowly moving down or up the Mekong. I felt happy and relaxed. I didn't have to hurry anywhere. I could patiently wait for the sun to move down towards the horizon. Look at the picture on this page. The warm colors produced by the setting sun, the reflections in the river, plus the grass, and bizarrely shaped tree trunks in foreground created a magical atmosphere. The Mekong River in Vientiane.
This large, dramatic Buddha statue below is part of an impressive collection of over 200 ferro-concrete sculptures dotted around a riverside meadow located 24 kilometers from Vientiane. This very special and unusual place is called Xiang Quan, or Buddha Park, and was built in 1959 by the philosopher Bunlua Sulalat, who famously and bizarrely combined Buddhist and Hindu philosophies and merged them with mythology and visual arts. Luang Prabang. Situated in northern Laos, Luang Prabang is the country's premier tourist destination. In my opinion, it is one of most beautiful spots in Southeast Asia. It is strikingly situated on a peninsula formed where the Mekong and Khan rivers meet. Once the royal capital of Laos, and still considered to be its religious heart, This captivating town is a subtle blend of traditional Lao architecture, colonial buildings, and delightful Buddhist temples at almost every corner. Somebody once said that the word charming was created just to describe Luang Prabang. I totally agree with this statement. From the first moment I stepped into this fascinating world of old, narrow streets and glistering temples filled with friendly, saffron-clad monks, I fell in love with it. Watching hundreds of monks taking part in the morning street procession, collecting food donations from locals, was a heartwarming and unforgettable experience. Beautiful gardens, a breathtaking river view, delicious street food, clean air, and very friendly people complete this charming picture. It is no wonder that Luang Prabang was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1995. Wok Xiang Tong. Morning Street Procession. Along the Mekong River. With its estimated length of 4,350 kilometers, the Mekong is one of the world's major rivers. In fact, it is the world's 12th longest river and the 7th longest in Asia. The source of the Mekong is located on the Tibetan Plateau. From there, the river flows through Yunnan in China, along the Burma-Thai-Laos border, and across southern Laos. In Cambodia, it splits into two main rivers, the Basak and the First River. By the time it reaches Vietnam, it is a maze of small canals, rivers, and streams that create a huge flat landform called a delta. After that, the water of the mighty Mekong reaches its final destination, the South China Sea. See map on page 5. The Mekong sunset in Luang Prabang.
It was early morning when I carefully crossed a narrow, shaky plank to board an old cargo boat docked at the river port in Luang Prabang. It was smelly and dark inside, but, not discouraged, I sat down on the narrow bench squeezed between an elderly, wrinkled man and a very small window. I didn't know that I would have to wait a few more hours before the vessel would finally depart for its trip up the Mekong River. The journey was painfully slow as the small, overloaded boat struggled against the strong river current. What saved me was my tiny window. It was a good observation point. I could see sampans passing by, a group of people cooling off in the water, fishermen immersed to their waists, and small children playing in the shallows.
Questions and language arts.
Part 3. Vietnam. Geography. Vietnam is an S-shaped, long and narrow country stretching along the eastern side of the Indochinese peninsula. Generally, it can be divided into 3 geographically and culturally diverse regions. In the north, there is the fertile Red River Delta, surrounded by mountains on 3 sides. It also includes the spectacular Halong Bay off the coast of Haiphong, famous for its spectacular limestone rock formations. The long and narrow central part of Vietnam is characterized by the Trung Son mountain range in the west, short rivers running straight into the South China Sea across the region, and several scenic beaches along the coast. The southern region is dominated by the rich and fertile Mekong Delta, the leading rice-producing area in the country. See map on page 5. Fishing near Hoi An in central Vietnam.
Questions and language arts.
Ho Chi Minh City. Formerly known as Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City is by far the largest, richest, and most developed city in Vietnam. It is the country's commercial heart and its window to the world. During its heyday colonial times, when the French considered it as its capital of Indochina, Saigon was called the Paris of the Orient. It has many remnants of the glorious past, such as elegant colonial hotels overlooking spacious boulevards, the city hall, and the general post office building. They perfectly harmonize with the narrow, tree-lined streets, where you find fashionable boutiques, cozy bars, and souvenir shops. There is also a more Asian side of the city, with its traditional busy markets and century-old pagodas, and of course, its very own Chinatown. Throughout the city, East and West blend perfectly in the sidewalk cafes and restaurants. The statue of Ho Chi Minh in front of Saigon City Hall.
After giving many compliments to Ho Chi Minh City, I feel that I need to mention its annoying side. The city has over 9 million residents, and I had a feeling that all of them, at the same time, took to the streets with their ear-splitting motorbikes. The street traffic was absolutely horrific in Saigon. I found it nearly impossible to legally cross some of the busiest streets. Apparently, there are 5 million motorbikes registered there. Cynthia Lee told me about her frightening experience of crossing the road there. She said she followed the example of the locals and just stepped out onto the busy road and walked at a very slow and steady pace as the insane traffic somehow weaved around her. That was how she crossed up to 6 lanes of traffic and lived to tell about it. She certainly didn't follow the look both ways before you cross the road rule. What would her mother say?
Mekong Delta. When the Mekong, one of the world's great rivers, enters Vietnam, it splits into several smaller distributaries and forms a maze of narrow canals and channels that give the region its local name, Song Coo Long, or the River of Nine Dragons. Over a long period of time, the river that carries a large quantity of sediments formed a huge flat landform called a delta. Thanks to its rich alluvial soil, the Mekong Delta is the main rice, vegetable, and fruit-growing area in Vietnam. One of the canals in the Mekong Delta.
A short 2-day trip to the Mekong Delta from Ho Chi Minh City was a sheer joy for me and my friend Joe. There are not too many roads in the region, so we did most of our traveling by boat, the same way the locals do. We traveled slowly along narrow canals, surrounded by lush tropical vegetation. The river banks seemed to be inaccessible, guarded by dense evergreen mangroves, similar to those in the Tai O wetlands. We passed hundreds of boats of different kinds and sizes, heavily loaded with food, clothes, animals, furniture, and construction materials. The Mekong Delta is a unique region where life on the water has remained unchanged for generations. I was very happy to be able to experience it with my own eyes.
One of the main branches of the Mekong River. People of the Mekong Delta.
I found the people from the Mekong Delta were very friendly. Smiles like these greeted us at almost every corner. When you travel, the best way to learn about the local people is to meet them personally. Mr. Tulim is a 70-something-year-old gentleman who lives in Rao Ram village in the Mekong Delta. He has a nice brick house in the middle of his fruit plantation. Mr. Tu kindly greeted us with traditional hospitality, which included delicious freshly picked fruit and a big jar of homemade wine made of deadly snakes and some local herbs. As we feasted, he told us a tragic story from his life. During the Vietnam War, many families were bitterly divided over different political views. Mr. Tu Liem was a supporter of South Vietnamese government forces, while his younger brother fought on the other side, along with the communist Viet Cong guerrillas. The area near their house witnessed some heavy fighting. Unfortunately, Mr. Tu's brother was tragically killed near the so-called Road of No Return, located in the area.
Floating markets. Bustling and colorful floating markets are one of the most interesting sights in the Mekong Delta. As most of the goods along the delta are transported by river, the best way to trade them is directly from boats. Farmers from the region bring their goods, fruits, and vegetables to the markets and sell them to local dealers, who then sell the products to shops in the neighboring towns. Some individual customers also go there to buy their groceries. The pictures on these two pages show Kai Bay, one of the many well-known floating markets in the region. Trading begins very early in the morning, and by sunrise, the market is already full of merchants and customers. Fruits and vegetables for sale are usually displayed on the long, upright bamboo posts attached to the boats, or simply placed on the roofs. Smaller boats slowly row around selling fruits or food for breakfast, including rice, noodles, and dumplings. What a sight! The morning scenes of Kai Bay Floating Market.
Questions and language arts.
Binh Thuan Desert. Vietnam is a humid subtropical country with lush green vegetation, but there is one region that is very different from the rest of the nation. It is called Binh Thuan and is located near the coast, about halfway between Nha Trang and Ho Chi Minh City. You can find it on the map on page 5. Some parts of the region receive less than 500 millimeters of rain, which makes it the driest place in Southeast Asia. Why? Well, less than 50 years ago, Binh Thuan was still covered with a thick, dry forest, but due to deforestation and development that caused soil erosion, flooding, and drought, it turned into a dry, barren desert. Now, the main landscape features of the region are dry rolling plains, immense sand dunes, vast canyons, blue lakes, rocky mountains, and long deserted beaches.
While browsing the internet, looking for travel and photographic ideas for my trip, I saw some stunning photos of women wearing traditional conical hats, walking through incredibly shaped yellow sand dunes. That was not the kind of landscape that I expected to see in Vietnam, which is famous for evergreen tropical vegetation, rice fields, and palm trees. At that moment, I knew I had to go and see the white sand dunes of Binh Thuan Desert.
The white sand dunes of Binh Thuan Desert.
It was late in the afternoon. Joe and I were inside an old American Jeep, traveling hastily along the winding coastal road across Binh Thuan Desert. Suddenly, the driver slowed down and turned into a dusty, bumpy track. A few minutes later, the car stopped in front of the charming Bao Trang Lake. Its shallower ends were covered with lotus flowers. On the other side of the aquamarine painted lake were the famous white sand dunes. A narrow, earthy path led us through a pine grove to the dunes. The scenery was absolutely sensational. The huge sandy hills, beautifully shaped by wind, rolled as far as the eyes could see. The sun was still quite high in the sky, revealing their natural, pristine, white-yellowish colors. The smooth, velvety surface of the dunes was only interrupted by occasional clumps of bushes and single tufts of grass. As the sun was going down towards the horizon, the colors became warmer, turning yellow and orange. I sat down on the top of the sandy ridge, stunned by the fantastic play of colors created by the setting sun and the shadows of the dunes.
Red sand dunes.
It was nearly 5 o'clock, and we had to hurry back to the coast to see the red sand dunes before the sun would dip below the horizon. Unlike the tranquil white sand dunes, this place, located at the outskirts of the village and resort of Mui Ne, was swarmed with countless herds of visitors. The dunes were also filled with small kids holding sheets of plastic used for sand sledding, the most popular activity there. To my dismay, the setting sun was mostly obscured by clouds, ruining my hungry appetite for artistic photography. In the end, I took some nice photos, but my heart is still crying with disappointment.
High school girl students in Vietnam wear traditional outfits as uniforms. These small ridges produced in sand by wind are called ripple marks. The red sand dunes of Binh Thuan Desert.
Questions and language arts.
Mui Ne Fishing Village.
For me, Mui Ne Fishing Village was one of the most interesting places in Vietnam. Mui Ne, meaning sheltered peninsula, is a small fishing village and home to one of the most beautiful stretches of beaches in Vietnam. Every day, early in the morning, the village comes to life when hundreds of villagers go to the beach to collect the night catch. The problem is that for most of the year, strong howling winds blow towards the coast, creating huge waves that impetuously crash into the beach. The fishing boats, unable to reach the shore, are anchored far in the distance. The dramatic spectacle being held on the beach is absolutely amazing. While the strong men in their little round basket boats skillfully battle the roaring ocean, the women anxiously await on the shore. As the little boats can easily capsize and the catch get lost, only a few baskets of seafood can be brought to the shore at a time. Therefore, the dangerous trips have to be made many times. Eventually, all the fish, crabs, scallops, shrimp, and other seafood are brought to the shore, loaded on trucks and ox carts, and peace returns to the beach until the next day.
Nha Trang. Nha Trang is Vietnam's most popular beach resort and a bustling town. This area, surrounded by mountains and rice paddies, offers a sandy stretch that runs for many kilometers across the beautiful bay. The beach is lined with cozy bars and restaurants, small cafes and food stalls. They are shaded by palm trees that gently sway in the warm tropical breeze. The beach is especially popular in the afternoon when thousands of city residents and tourists flock there to enjoy the wind or take a dip in the ocean. After dark, hundreds of restaurants fill up with visitors enjoying the friendly atmosphere and excellent seafood. Nha Trang Municipal Beach. Parasailing with Joe Chan.
When Yatsek and I arrived in Nha Trang, we immediately went to its renowned municipal beach. We were not disappointed. The beach was long and very spectacular. We saw some colorful parachutes beautifully flying up in the sky. At that moment, I had a strong desire to experience such a thrill, parasailing. When we agreed on the price, some locals helped me to put on a safety harness and a life jacket. Then, they gave me some basic instructions about what to do in the air and finally attached me to a motorboat. They told me to count to 3 and run. You can imagine how I felt at that moment. The motorboat quickly switched into high speed. I kept running towards the sea. The most tremendous feeling of excitement was when my feet lifted off the sand. In a few seconds, I was flying hundreds of feet up in the air. It was truly unbelievable. Wow! I was able to enjoy a 360-degree spectacular panorama of Nha Trang. It seemed to me that the city was meant to be appreciated from that perspective. Like an eagle, I flew over the whole bay before softly landing in the shallow water close to the beach. Definitely, parasailing was the most thrilling experience during my trip to Vietnam, if not in my whole life.
Nha Trang Fishing Port. Nha Trang is also a fishing port. Most of the local boats moor on the Kei River estuary in the northern part of the city. A view over the port is quite amazing. There are hundreds of blue-painted fishing boats anchored in the shallow water. The boats are different in size, but they all have narrow red horizontal stripes painted on their sides and sterns, and a vertical stripe along their bows. Red and yellow flags gently flap in the breeze. The harbor is alive with activity. Small fishing boats slowly cruise around while fishermen load or unload their boats, getting ready for a night trip. Around Nha Trang. One of the most popular attractions of Nha Trang is a small but picturesque archipelago located a few kilometers southwest of the city. Easily accessible by boat, these islands provide an excellent opportunity for swimming, snorkeling, and scuba diving. The clear water surrounding the islands, especially around Hon Mun, Ebony Island, is home to one of the most colorful coral reefs in Vietnam, inhabited by abundant tropical marine life that includes reef sharks and stingrays. For people who are looking for a peaceful getaway from city life, the numerous secluded beaches along the sandy shoreline north of Nha Trang are the places to go. The background picture shows the beautiful Doc Lee Beach in Thuy Dam, about 30 minutes drive from Nha Trang. Photos of beaches like this, with white sand, azure sky, crystal clear turquoise water, and coconut palm trees leaning towards the ocean, are typical features of tourist brochures. So, welcome to the tropical paradise of Vietnam.
As you may know from volumes 1 and 2 of this series, African Safari and Adventures Down Under, I like traveling off the beaten track, which means going to places rarely visited by other tourists. Vietnam is a popular country, but there are still many places that have hardly any visitors. One day, Joe and I hired a car and drove to a very remote sandy peninsula 2 hours away from Nha Trang. The view from the top of a dune was spectacular. I was stunned by the long, absolutely unspoiled stretch of sandy beach and the turquoise water of the ocean that reminded me of the western coast of Namibia. Unbelievable. I had found a small part of Africa in the middle of Vietnam.
Questions and language arts.
Hoi An. Hoi An is a small town in central Vietnam and one of the country's main tourist attractions. It was founded more than 2,000 years ago and prospered as an important trading port from the 16th to the 18th centuries. Hoi An is renowned for its historic architecture, a unique mix of Vietnamese, Chinese, Japanese, and European styles. Most of the well-preserved buildings are now used as souvenir shops, art galleries, hotels, cafes, and restaurants. There is also lots of Chinese heritage in Hoi An, including clan houses, pagodas, and community halls. To better protect and maintain its wonderful architecture, in 1999, the city was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The town is probably the most attractive when the sun sets. At that time, most of the shops and restaurants that are rather empty during the hot day fill up with talkative customers who come from all corners of the world to experience Hoi An's unique atmosphere. The streets are neatly decorated with colorful Vietnamese silk and paper lanterns. On every full moon night of each lunar month, those lanterns are the only source of light, when the old town transforms into a magical land of traditional food, song, games, and dance. The main picture shows the picturesque Japanese covered bridge, built by the Japanese trading community in 1593 to link them with the Chinese quarter on the other side of the small stream. My Son. Set beautifully in a densely vegetated valley, 55 kilometers from Hoi An, are the impressive ruins of My Son. This site used to be the most important religious center of the ancient Champa Empire between the 4th and 13th centuries. Later forgotten, My Son was eventually rediscovered by French archaeologists in 1890. The complex consists of 7 groups of ruins, standing amidst a lush green tropical jungle. The most famous tower at Misan stood 24 meters tall. It was made of sandstone and was carved with images of lions and elephants. Sadly, all the structures were almost entirely destroyed by US bombings during the Vietnam War.
The 10th century B5 tower is one of the best preserved treasures of Misan.
The world has recognized the importance of Misan, and in 1999, it was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site for its universal value to mankind.
The 10th century B5 tower is one of the best preserved treasures of Misan.
Travel tip.
Traveling in the tropics can be tough. Unfortunately, I had an opportunity to experience it the hard way during my day trip to Misan. That summer day was exceptionally hot. The air temperature soared to high 30s, there was virtually no wind, and a few thin clouds did not provide enough much-needed shade. A visit to Misan requires some walking, as the ruins scattered around the jungle are only connected with a narrow path. I was walking around trying to take some nice photos of seriously damaged ruins, headless stone statues, and exquisite bas-reliefs. I was not comfortable. My eyes were sore and sweat was pouring over my cheeks. Suddenly I felt dizzy. I had no choice but to sit down, drink some water, and rest for a while. So be prepared when you travel, and remember to listen to your body at all times.
Hue,
Beautifully located along the picturesque banks of the majestic Perfume River in central Vietnam lies the imperial city of Hue. Established as the capital of unified Vietnam in 1802, it was not only the political but also the cultural and religious center under the Nguyen dynasty until 1945. Apart from its scenic location, the city is famous for some of Vietnam's most valuable historical remnants, including the citadel that contains the Forbidden City and the royal palaces. The area to the south of Hue is dotted with 13 historical imperial tombs and numerous pagodas scattered across the scenic countryside. The green banks of the Perfume River in Hue attract many local people looking for peace and silence. There are thousands of so-called boat people living along the banks of the Perfume River. For many of them, like this family, a small boat like this is what they call home. This is where they live, work, sleep, cook, and spend most of their time. The Citadel. A Vietnamese national flag flies on top of the mast of the 37-meter-tall flag tower. The tower was erected by Emperor Gia Long and has dominated Hue's skyline since 1809. Most of the area to the north of the Perfume River is occupied by the Citadel, a huge, roughly square-shaped fortress that contains many remnants of Vietnam's imperial past: the Forbidden City, the royal palaces, canals, lakes, and gardens. Once off-limits to ordinary citizens, now a sizable chunk of Hue's population lives within its 6.6-meter-high brick walls. 10 imposing gates provide access to the complex, each with a 2-story watchtower. Life goes slowly inside the Citadel. There is only a handful of small local shops selling basic necessities. Some people fish or collect plants that cover lakes and canals like green carpets. Even the road traffic is light, with mostly bicycles and motorbikes slowly moving along the narrow streets. At the heart of the Citadel, surrounded by a moat and 6-meter-high walls, lies the Imperial City, housing the Emperor's residence and important state buildings. It is a fascinating and incredibly peaceful place, with beautiful palaces and temples set amidst evergreen trees and colorful flowers. In the very middle of it is the Forbidden Purple City, where, like in Gugong Palace in Beijing, no man except the emperor was permitted to enter. This place was solely designated for the emperor's personal use, and only the queen, royal concubines, female servants, and eunuchs were allowed inside.
Visiting the Imperial City in Hue was a wonderful photographic experience for me. I loved wandering around the narrow lanes shaded by branchy trees. The complex is beautifully set amidst a garden filled with aesthetically cut lawns, bushes, trees, and colorfully blooming flowers. I especially like the contrast created by the orange roofs of the imperial palaces, the vibrant green vegetation, and the azure sky. This fabulous imperial enclosure reminded me of Beijing's Forbidden City, except that it was much bigger and always full of noisy visitors. I really detest crowds. Luckily, that day the palace in Hue was almost deserted. I was fully embraced by its tranquil atmosphere and imagined what it could have felt like when the emperor lived there.
The Royal Tombs. The Royal Tombs are one of the most fascinating attractions of Hue. Only 7 of the 13 rulers of the Nguyen dynasty were given the honor of being buried in their own mausoleums. The tombs are generally located along the banks of Perfume River and feature outstanding architecture harmoniously blended into the natural surroundings. The pictures on this page show the tomb of Ming Mong, probably the most majestic of all of the royal tombs, built between 1841 and 1843. It consists of several pavilions and courtyards beautifully set amidst picturesque lakes and gardens. The elegant and serene Tomb of Tu Duc, built between 1864 and 1867, is located on a small pine-forested hill surrounded by beautiful ponds filled with lotus flowers. Along Perfume River. A visit to Hue would not be complete without taking a boat ride along the exceptionally beautiful Perfume or Huang River. The river originates in the Truong mountain range and gently meanders for about 80 kilometers through spectacular mountainous countryside before reaching the sea past the city of Hue. Its unusual name derives from the fact that flowers from orchards upriver fall into the water, giving the river a perfume-like aroma. A woman rowing across the Perfume River. The Perfume River has been an important river tract for centuries, and many interesting temples and pagodas are scattered along its banks. One of them is Thien Mu, or Heavenly Lady Pagoda. Standing on top of a small hill, the over 400-year-old 7-story octagonal tower has become an iconic symbol of the city of Hue. The hill is a wonderful viewpoint over the river and a perfect place to observe its life. Small and large boats piled with fish, fresh vegetables, and construction materials. Thien Mu Pagoda.
Questions and language arts.
Yacek's travel diary.
I love visiting local markets. Wherever I go, they are always on my priority list. Markets are places where people bring what they produce locally and sell things that are typical of the region or the country. The pictures show the town market in Hue. The most picturesque part was the vegetable and fruit section that had an amazing variety of products, all fresh and attractively presented. I had never seen many of them before. The place was buzzing with customers striving to get the best deal. Bicycle rickshaws, also known as cyclos, are one of the most common means of transport on the streets of Indochina. They are human-powered and have a comfortable passenger seat in front. Although meant to carry people, cyclos are often used to transport almost anything, including live animals, food, furniture, boxes, etc. Riding rickshaws is fun, but it also provides their drivers with an income necessary to feed their families. That's why I use them.
Jacek Piwowarczyk and Cynthia Lee. English in My Backpack. Volume 3. Indochina. Buddhist Fat Ho Memorial College. 2010.